Hi guys, Yuki here, back with Seduce Me 2, the Demon War. Part 8 of the alternate routes, with still on James. I think we're finally heading to the last bad end. I don't know if there's any other good end other than that. Yeah. Off to war we go. Come on. I finally returned to our room and flopped onto the bed, letting the events of my time in the abyssal plains replay in my mind. I was trapped here, hunted by angels, and soon enough I was about to go marching into a battle against the Demon Lord for my freedom. The more I thought about it, the more surreal the feeling became. I was going to be in a room, meeting a powerful adversary face to face, and set myself free of the curse he brought it down upon me. And that I was captured by angels and almost killed by them made the time I spent away from the human world very wild. I felt like a dream, but I knew it couldn't be one. It was too vivid, too real to even be close to a dream. As James entered the room at last, I smiled and stood, walking over and wrapping my arms around him as he returned my embrace.
God, I was so worried about you.
And I was worried about you. We held each other, locked in silence and unable to say anything more. We had been in a heavy predicament and we escaped. Sure, we were probably branded now, but we escaped nonetheless. All we could do in the moment was hold on to each other and listen to our synchronized heartbeats. As the thought of tomorrow danced in my head, I began to fear it even more. Was I ready to go into battle? Was James? Were any of us, for that matter? We were all about to walk into the final battle of a world war. Would we survive? Would I live to see James afterward and feel his embrace again? Tomorrow brought too many questions to think about, and I became frustrated and scared. Sleep. We would survive. We would be okay. I felt safe in James's arms, and I'm sure he felt safe in mine. We would return to the human world and be okay. James slowly walked me back to bed, and both of us tucked ourselves in, wrapping each other in our arms and escaping one last time in the darkness of slumber. Tomorrow would decide everything. The day of the siege finally dawned. We had arrived at the Demon Lord's castle, and we were ready as we could be. Many armies bearing different banners and colors rushed over the grounds before the castle, ready to rush in and lay waste to the Demon Lord and the remaining of his forces. All of us shared a common enemy, and upon his demise would finally know some form of peace. Even during the roll call of the major generals, the air became full of determination and pride.
Mirth! Avarice! Nadia! Fiorna! Aradum!
Each name called became a mark on history. This was a war to bring freedom or destruction to the demon world. If the rebellion didn't win this fight, then this war would never end. If the rebellion won, then the world would become united in a hopefully peaceful war. The hour before the battle was set to take place, my thoughts instantly ran back to our final meeting in the castle. Diane had pulled the leaders and us together, instructing us how exactly to proceed.
Zero, you will be joining Shadow and Sergeant in the front, taking care of the main army head-on. I expect that you will come out of it alive.
Yes, my lady.
Rabbit, Faye, you are in charge of range attacks and defense. We cannot allow any of those blasted imps getting to us from behind.
Yes, ma'am!
As Diana looked to me, I grew slightly fearful. I had to get into the Demon Lord's castle, but how exactly did Diana plan on getting me there?
You and your fiancé will take the side route straight to the castle.
Wait. Huh?
We've organized our army to have our strongest on the front lines and against the tree line, giving us a side route for you to make your way straight to the castle.
If anything trickles into the side route, you'll be able to handle it. However, there is something I must ask of you.
What is it?
If you are indeed attacked, you need to defend your fiancé the entire way there. Do not let him use his energy.
Absolutely not.
When you get to the castle, I will be fighting one-on-one with the Demon Lord. If something should happen to me, then I need you to take over. She is not ready to fight him, and you need to be at full strength to finish him off.
She's been taught well. Let her prove herself when the time comes.
I stared, listening and reaffirming the order. I couldn't lie, I was nervous. However, I was determined enough to see this through. I looked over at my fiancé with a confident smile. I got this, don't worry. Despite the worried look in his eyes, he nodded and held my hand, trusting me in my decision to agree with Diana's command. Diana rolled her shoulders and looked at the map draped over the war table between us all. Her gaze pierced into the parchment as the aura around her body pulsated in anger.
I will fly ahead and meet the Demon Lord head-on. No matter what happens, I will not allow that monster to live.
The pure determination and anger in her voice practically sent a shiver down my spine. She was set on seeing this through to the end, and I was sure she was willing to even die if it meant the Demon Lord with her. The remaining incubi and the wives were asked to stay behind the army and guard the main base, where Rabbit and Faye were stationed. They needed as many eyes as possible in the back of the battle, so the four couples were perfect to keep things in check. As they agreed, the meeting ended and the mental preparation had begun. The idea of the upcoming battle scared me, sending waves of fear and worry up and down my body in response to the thought.
Nervous?
I would be lying if I said I wasn't. James smiled and held my hand tightly before bringing it up and kissing over it.
No matter what happens, we will end this, and you will see the human world again. You have my word.
I listened to him speak before nodding, taking in a deep breath. Everything would be okay. I would be fine. I had to believe in myself and get us to the castle when the time was right. Like a beacon, our forces became the banner of hope and strength for the rebellion. At the sight of Diana, many soldiers bowed or stared in awe and inspiration. Maybe it was her presence, or maybe it was what she stood for, but as Diana stood at the cliffside of the mountain, the air became full of energy and power. My fiancé, Rabbit, Faye, and I stood beside her as Diana stood at the ledge of the cliffside addressing the rebellion for their final battle. Her voice echoed across the field, booming and reverberating through the air like thunder.
Milites! Et hoc liberati esturei tramcun tuis omnibus conversiris! Sto vobiscum reducitic vos ad spem, nocte, lavabir mur, arcem, hostium sanguine!
What is she saying?
She said that she stands with them and will help them gain their freedom from their enemy. Tonight, the Demon Lord's castle will be bathed in blood.
Really?
I don't think she means it literally, but she's riling up the soldiers for war, as she should.
I nodded as I stared at the back of Diana's head. A part of me felt a little intimidated and jealous of the power she had. She really could make her armies bow to her and obey her every whim. At the same time, I knew that she was doing the right thing for this world.
Ele Dio dominati sun nostri, nos destruet, eum mitere, profundissimum, inferni detractos.
Rabbit and Faye stepped forward and held their hands out towards the castle, focusing their energies and forcing the stone walls around it to crumble and dissolve down into the earth. Diana summoned her saber, letting it shine brilliantly as the purple taint over her skin began to twist and turn. Before my eyes, the taint on her back took shape, lifting off of Diana's skin and morphed into a set of demonic wings. I could only stare, jaw-dropped, as Diana's body lifted off the ground and began to fly over the legions, slowly gliding towards the castle.
To war! To battle!
At her final command, Diana's wings pulsated in the air, flapping gracefully as she swooped down and forward. She was charging and flying for the castle wall, saber bared and ready to spill blood. As the armies below began to bellow and march forward, Rabbit took hold of my shoulder and turned me away from the castle to face her.
Come, we must hurry.
Understanding the need for urgency, I nodded and rushed forward with the rest of the incubi towards the slope down the mountainside.
Everything is in order. Sergeant Diana's guard are at the front lines, while Shadow is with his legion to the west.
What of our route?
We've done what we can to keep your way clear. We'll try to make sure the battle won't break through the path.
I nodded, feeling the need to rush nip at my heels, pushing me forward. My fiancé seemed to agree, gripping my hand and walking at my pace alongside me. But as we finally arrived at the forest line, Faye and Rabbit stopped, looking back at us.
Straight through here. The sound of the war will always be on your right, so do not get lost. You'll be fine, though. Just follow the tree line.
In sync, my fiancé and I nodded in acknowledgement before turning to see the other brothers and their wives. So, this is it.
Princess, brother, we'll see you in the end.
We have faith in you. You'll make it there, and we'll return to the human world soon.
Kick his dead body a couple times for me, alright? Right in the head.
We'll be right here rooting for you and watching your back, okay?
We'll finish this and rush in as soon as we can, alright?
You know what would make this really epic, now that I'm thinking about it now? If all the brothers, like, got together in order to defeat their dad. You know. That'd be interesting. That'd be, like, a good story. Or, you know, alternate.
Make sure you kick some serious ass. Show that old goat what he gets for messing with you.
We'll win this. We know we can.
You can do this. We'll see you soon, okay?
I smiled despite the nerves running through my body. I held onto my fiance's hand and gave it a hard squeeze before seeing one back in kind. We'll finish this. Then we'll go home. The group nodded before I slowly turned and looked into the tree line, took a breath, and rushed forward. Matching my speed, my love followed, weaving through the trees behind me to not lose sight of me. The journey was surprisingly fast, going through the trees. The sound of the war crashed beside us outside the tree line, causing me to cover my ears a bit from that volume, but I shook my head and pressed forward, not wanting to become distracted. The goal was to get to the castle. I had to focus. Before I could, however, I skidded to a stop, seeing imps appear from the distance and rush towards us. As my incubus came up behind me and spotted the imps, he prepared himself to attack, but I placed my hand on his arm, stopping him. I got this. I walked forward and formed my weapon, letting it shine brilliantly in the darkness of the forest around us and temporarily blinding the imps ahead of us. My spear gathered its mass in my hand, forming from my energy within my hands and settling into my palms. I twirled it around myself, getting used to the balance and weight before holding it behind me, ready to charge forward. The imps, who were blinded by my light only a moment, looked back at me and stared as they took note of the weapon I had possessed. With a battle cry, I rushed forward, taking advantage of their blank state. I can't. I lunged forward and ran my spear through one of the imps, effectively skewering him through the belly before ripping my spear and slicing down the imp beside me, completely carving open his chest. Wow, gruesome. The imps fell out as the others became shell-shocked at the sight. It must have been a big surprise to see a human cut down 2 of their number, but I wasn't in the mood to let them recover. My body quickly turned in front of other imp, as I quickly swung my weapon once again, slicing open his throat. With a bubbly cry, he fell as well as I rushed forward again towards the castle, uncaring. The remaining imps began to quake and step back in fear, most likely never expecting to see a human decimate their companions. I wasn't so friendly and merciful, especially in this war, as I lunged forward again and skewered through another imp, hearing the steel of my weapon breaking through his body. My incubus, despite probably being surprised at my carnage, followed as I continued forward, fighting through every imp that came in our way. I had lost count of how many crossed me, but I didn't care. All I cared about was getting to the castle. By the time I reached the end of the forest, there were a slew of dead bodies behind me. I stood at the tree line, panting and feeling waves of adrenaline and lack of energy run through my veins. I panted for air, slowly focusing on calming down as my energy quickly depleted from its adrenaline-filled high. The weapon in my hand quickly vanished, no longer able to maintain its form without my energy. That was all I could do before my energy was expended and a wave of exhaustion rolled through my body. I began to fall forward, exhausted. My fiancé, however, rushed forward and caught me in his arms. Blah.
Whoa! Are you okay?
Huh? I looked up to see James staring down at me with a deeply concerned gaze. We were safe for the moment, so I merely smiled up at him with a nod. I'm fine. I promise to protect you, like you protect me. James let out a small smile, kissing my forehead and hugging me to him.
That you did. I'm so proud to call you mine.
I hugged him back, feeling relief as we finally arrived at the castle and were about to rush inside. As we slowly pulled away, James lifted me up and helped me to my feet.
Will you be all right?
I nodded, shaking off the exhaustion from my mind. I was ready to end this. I looked up at the castle gates and felt a rush of determination run through me. Let's go finish this. With that, James and I rushed forward into the castle. The final battle had begun. Woo! It only took me like 15 minutes to get here. The ringing sound of clashing swords greeted me and James as we sprinted into the castle and toward the main hall. James placed a hand in front of me as I spotted the battle waging at the foot of the throne dais. Diana and the Demon Lord slammed their swords against each other over and over in a violent repetition with Diana leveled to her tall opponent in flight. Just from the force behind their swings, you would think that the sword would break and bend. The sound of their steel, however, could not cover the snarls that erupted from each of them as they pressed against the clash between them.
It's over, you brute bastard! We'll see about that!
With a heavy grunt, the Demon Lord pushed the sword forward into the pulse of red energy, causing Diana to fly back and slam into a pillar with a painful thud.
Ah!
Diana crumpled to the ground, her wings instinctively folding in against her back from the impact. However, it only took a second for her to recover and look up with a rejuvenated glare. Vaulting off the ground, Diana flew at the Demon Lord once more and slammed her sword into his, a large burst of purple flames erupting from between their weapons.
Ah! I will send you to hell where you belong!
James and I watched in silence as Diana and the Demon Lord danced their deadly duel, not wanting to get in the way of either of their rage. After all, James was merely a backup and Diana seemed fine so far. For some reason, however, as I stared at Diana, something about her hits looked almost effortless, like something was guiding her sword to land each strike. Was she that skilled in combat? After a flurry of deadlocks, Diana finally managed to swing her sword at an angle, slicing the back of the Demon Lord's hand and making him drop his weapon.
You!
The Demon Lord quickly stepped back and reared his hand back, forming a large red orb in his hand. However, as soon as he thrust it forward, it began to dissolve and dissipate in the air, vanishing completely before it reached Diana's body.
What?
Diana stared in shock at the occurrence, taking in that his attack didn't hit her, before she slowly grew a smirk on her face and a golden glow over her blood-red irises.
Looks like you're all out of energy.
With another angry growl, the Demon Lord repeated his action, only to stare in disbelief as it evaporated into the air. It was large enough when it was in his hand, yet it vanished all too quickly. Something was wrong. Diana didn't seem to care as she lifted her hand back behind her and formed a large purple orb in her palm before shooting it forward. The orb slammed into the Demon Lord's chest and pushed him back against the pillar harshly, forming a large crack in the stone at the impact.
It's over!
With her battle cry, Diana gripped into her saber in both hands and flew forward, charging to skewer the Demon Lord through the chest. As she began to fly forward, I gasped at the sight of white feathers slowly painting over Diana's demonic wings. Angels were here. Wait! Diana wasn't listening. Her eyes became completely glossed over in a gold color as a strange white glow began to emanate from her form like a holy light and guiding her forward towards her intended victim. With a mere blink, Diana had run her saber through the Demon Lord's chest, piercing through his heart and impaling him against the pillar. James and I could do nothing but stare in shock at what Diana had done and what was happening to the succubus in question. Her body lit off an almost ethereal white glow as she snarled into the Demon Lord's face.
May Satan take you and tear you apart in the pits of hell!
My body shuddered in fear at the sound of her voice. While she naturally had some sort of demonic resonance as she spoke, something else was laced into her voice, giving it an almost celestial lift and tone. The Demon Lord's eyes glazed over and soon lost their light as he ever slowly went lit over the blade embedded within him, blood slowly dripping from his mouth and onto Diana's forearms. Diana, however, released the hand of her blade and glided back, shaking her arms to rid them of the Demon Lord's blood. Despite what I normally expected from Diana, the succubus didn't seem to care that her mortal enemy had fallen at last. She didn't even seem to care that her wings had become angelic and covered in beautiful white feathers. If it wasn't for her tainted demon and horns, I would imagine Diana at the moment would be confused as the angels I imagined from the human world. The reality of the situation, however, was apparent. Something was wrong with Diana.
It is done. It is over.
I looked at James to see his cautious but deadly glare burn itself onto Diana's form as she looked up at him, eyes still glazed over in a gold glow.
It isn't truly over, is it?
Diana stared at the pair of us for a moment before lowering herself onto her feet and onto the floor and letting her new angelic wings fold against her back patiently. With an almost sickeningly sweet smile, Diana lifted her hand towards James and beckoned to him.
You are correct. You must take your throne, Restrau.
My anger flared at the sound of his true name escaping her lips, but my soul began to quiver in fear. Diana was being controlled by angels, and now she seemed to be an instrument for James's destiny. James Hoare remained at my side, glaring hard at Diana, still with a hand across my body in protection.
You do not have permission to use my name with such familiarity.
And why do you say that? I am the queen of the demon world now, and you are my betrothed.
Who would say, Rose? Diana ran her hands through her hair and over her horns, dragging them down her neck and over each curve of her upper body seductively. This was definitely not Diana.
My mind, body, and soul are completely yours, as is the domination of this world. I share these pleasures and power with you, with the purest love from the bottom of my heart, as your true, universally intended bride.
James reached his hand back and took my hand, knowing that her words were digging into my mind with edges of betrayal and annoyance. I knew James wouldn't accept her, but I also knew that this was not Diana who knew what the angel controlling her would do next. Diana tilted her head to the side, slowly lowering herself onto her knees and stretching her arms by her side, baring herself to us.
Unless you desire me to be your slave, I will happily give you the throne and eternally serve you until the end of time.
Enough! Release her and reveal yourself, Seraph!
I gripped James's hand, staring wide-eyed at Diana as she simply chuckled and guided her hands together, pressing her palms between her breasts and leaning back to stare at the high marble ceiling.
This child of Lilith is offering herself to you, demon. Yet you refuse to take it.
You know my answer.
It is a foolish answer. This demoness can become a vessel of power for you, the mother of your lineage. What more can you desire that the human can hope to provide?
Stop it! This time I had to interject. This was wrong and underhanded. Whatever spell Diana was under gripped her tightly enough to become some sort of twisted submissive to James, and no part of me appreciated it. This angel was some sort of sick and twisted being that needed to be stopped somehow. James finally stepped forward, forming a sword in his hand and staring down at it in serious thought.
An angel like you can never understand the desires I hold.
That is because your desires are misplaced. You know deep in your heart that you desire to rule over this world. Your demonic blood craves the power.
I watched James gaze deep into the steel of his blade, locking eyes with himself, still, and he continued to speak.
It is true that some part of me wishes to rule this world. Some darker, unfeeling shadow of the past that was raised to live and become the ultimate lord of this plane.
As James gripped the handle of his sword tightly, he shifted his gaze to Diana's body.
But my heart knows where it belongs. With the human who loves me as I love her!
My heart fluttered in my chest as James's words, feeling every ounce of passion and determination embedded with each sound. Diana, however, let out a dark laugh.
Love, how fleeting. Your defiance comes from such a weak emotion.
As Diana finally straightened back up, I stepped back from the sight of her eyes. Instead of black pupils, her golden eyes held two dark crosses burning within her lost irises. The smirk on her face intensified almost like a Cheshire cat's sickening grin.
Allow me to show you a power greater than love!
With a hard flap of her wings, Diana jetted forward, forming another saber in her hand and arcing it across James. Her target countered in reply, clashing his sword to hers with a heavy clang. I instantly jumped back, away from the fight, as James and Diana began to clash swords again and again. James's face showed his pure concentration as Diana's crackled in both an insane glee and obsessive desire.
Fight however you like! You cannot escape your destiny!
I will, and you will not stop me!
The speed of their clashes increased. The rapid sound of steel beating steel crashed through the air like a wave of violent drums. They were equally matched, and neither seemed to be close to giving in. How long would this fight go for? I knew Diana was probably exhausted from the fight, but the angel was working through her, so there was a chance that her exhaustion wouldn't matter. Then again, James had not lifted a finger yet in this war, so he had energy to spare. The entire situation became full of confusion and concern as James and Diana continued to duel without hesitation or need for air. As James took a heavy swing towards Diana, the succubus leapt back and sank gracefully on her feet, using her wings to ease her descent and stance while she licked her lips.
Love is a fleeting game. Those who expect it to bring happiness will only experience sorrow in the end.
You're wrong! I was tired of this angel trying to get in between me and James. Enough was enough. I stepped forward, trying desperately to find more energy within me to fight alongside James, but spoke out regardless. You don't know anything about love.
I know more than you ever will, human. I have lived for eons serving heaven, and have watched your kind rant and rave all about love and its existence.
Diana lifted her hands to her chest, grasping as to where her heart was, and almost laughed at me at my words.
You humans use love for the most meaningless of things. I love him, I love her, I love this, I love that. You claim love to be a powerful emotion, yet you can't even give it the power it supposedly deserves, as you use it for everything. I've watched that word fall on deaf ears. I've seen lives destroyed, despite love guiding them forward. The mere word has become a throwaway amalgam of letters, used to express minor joy for things that will decay and die in the end.
It doesn't matter what you think. I knew deep down that the emotion of love was stronger, that this demon could have never imagined. This wasn't something I could debate against when I had experienced it firsthand with the man it was trying to take away. Diana laughed and shook her head, guffawing at my exclamation before stretching her arms out to the side.
Love is weak! I have claimed the body of a succubus who was full of true love, and not even her love could stop me!
I stared wide-eyed at Diana. I knew that she truly loved Sarah, but the angel was able to take hold of her somehow. Something was off. I shook my head and glared once more at Diana, bearing my gaze into her eyes that the angel was controlling her movements. You controlling her has nothing to do with love. You're taking advantage of her being weak from the fight with the Demon Lord. Finally, Diana's face melted into a glare as she bared her teeth at me and growled.
You know nothing! Less than nothing! Filthy, unclean human! You open your mouth and spout nonsense and forget your place in the universe!
Diana's saber began to glow in an unfriendly white color as Diana's hand began to quake holding it. Was Diana fighting back, or was the angel's anger shaking her limbs with rage? I wasn't able to tell.
I will erase you!
Oh. A hard flap of Diana's wings made Diana fly forward towards me, sword held high and ready to rip me in two. However, her blade was met James's as he rushed up and guarded me.
You!
James pressed back against Diana's saber, his body glowing a dark gold color in response to her ever-growing aura.
Your battle is with me, Angel. I will not let you touch her!
With a heavy snarl, Diana pressed herself against the deadlock, leaning towards James and practically frothing at the mouth.
I will make you yield!
Unaffected by her scream, James summoned a burst of yellow energy forward and knocking Diana back towards the throne dais. Diana flipped back and floated the air gracefully, shaking her head before sneering at James. The demons sprang at each other once more, slamming their swords together in hopes of pushing the other away or to strike the opponent down. Their purple and gold clashed through the room, the speed of their duel growing exponentially with each hit and parry. Watching Diana, however, I could tell the exhaustion was hitting her hard physically. Her hits became wild and thrown by adrenaline instead with purpose and intent to kill. The angel wouldn't be able to hold on for her long. James was putting up a good fight despite this, easily blocking and dodging her attacks before pummeling a barrage of his own, laced with gold energy and burst between their swords at each hit. As soon as an opening became available once again, James gripped onto Diana's wrist and twisted it back, making her release her saber with a painful scream and causing him to drop his own sword.
Enough of this!
Using the momentum of this attack, James spun Diana around so her arm was almost dislocated behind her and slammed his feet onto the back of her knees, causing her to buckle forward and land with two painful thuds. James, however, pushed Diana farther down and slammed her body onto the ground, trapping her arm against her back with a foot and gripping onto Diana's large wings with both hands. I gasped. He wasn't going to rip them off of her, right? With a concentrated glare in the back of Diana's head, his fist tightened around Diana's feathery wings and suddenly sent a wave of golden flames through them. The fire stopped at Diana's back, only consuming the wings and gold and red flame. Diana's scream echoed through the room, bouncing off the floor and walls into the frenzy as she could do nothing but feel the flames engulf her wings. The feathers that painted over them began to burn and dissolve into ash, falling around her. Soon enough, the pain became unbearable enough to force Diana to make her wings vanish back into her skin, where 2 large burn marks singed themselves.
I'm sorry.
Not giving Diana a single ounce of mercy, James dug his foot beneath her body and flipped her over, causing her back to arc in pain from the impact of her burns on the marble. Smoke snaked out from her back as she gasped loudly. As Diana opened her mouth and let out a breath, James quickly grasped onto her neck, squeezing tightly and causing the succubus beneath him to choke. James! Neither demon would hear me as Diana grabbed onto James's wrist and began to claw at him, desperate to make him let go of her. Her eyes began to flicker from gold to their original clear white and red colors as Diana could do nothing but spasm from lack of air. I'm sorry, Diana. Don't. I wasn't sure if stopping him would stop the angel. If James did let go of Diana, what if the angel took control and attempted to choke him instead? It was a complicated situation, but it had to be done to stop the angel from using Diana. I'm sorry, Diana. As James tightened his grip, Diana arced back, spray of frothy saliva and blood erupting from her mouth toward the far wall. Ew. Her body continued to quake and spasm from the lack of air, and her face slowly began to turn blue. Diana's eyes slowly rolled into the back of her head, finally fading from gold to white as she dug her nails into James's wrist, trying one last time to make him release his grip on her. James would not budge. As Diana's body finally went limp and settled onto the marble, a large white aura of smoke wisped out of her chest and shot itself into the throned eye, settling on the steps and slowly growing taller in place. The white smoke finally formed into a familiar cloaked being who was arced forward, with his veiny hands tensed out beside him. Something about the angel, however, seemed different than before, as if he had somehow gained energy from being within Diana.
You filthy cur! You continue to try and defy your destiny when it is useless!
James stood and glared hard at the angel, forming his sword once again in his hand and pointing it towards his new opponent. His body began to glow and the room began to brighten at its golden aura.
I have no such destiny to remain in this world. My life is bound to the one I love, not to an empty chair gained through blood.
You will have no choice in the matter!
Like 2 bullets, James and the angel rushed at each other and collided with James's sword against the angel's bare hands. I expected James's blade to tear through the angel's flesh, but the steel pressed against the angel's hand like it was grazing stone. Oh. The angel gripped onto James's blade and slowly began to crush it beneath his hand, causing the magic surrounding it to falter and fade. James and I stared wide at the angel as it began to rip the broken pieces of the sword off and toss it to the side like it was plastic. Determined still, James shot his energy through the sword and reformed the blade, going once again for another attack, only to be blocked by the angel's forearms. Upon impact, the seal of the blade shattered like glass, falling to the ground.
I am no mere servant of heaven, demon. I am the keeper of destiny, the scribe of fates. You cannot defeat me no matter what spells you conjure.
Upon his final words, the angel pressed his hands forward and slammed them against James's chest, forcing him to fly back and slam into the far wall. James! I instantly began to rush towards him, but I found myself being lifted off the ground by the back of my neck and pulled away from James towards the angel.
No!
I grabbed at the back of my neck, feeling the angel's hands grip it tightly and keeping my body afloat somehow. His hand felt indeed like stone and concrete, grazing against my skin roughly and almost tearing at the flesh as I struggled. Oh, let me go, I guess. I'm dying.
I should have forced you to choose from the beginning, demon. This human will not see reason to let you go, but I know that you will see reason in the offer I will graciously give you now.
The angel held out my body, dangling me in the air like a doll as I flailed and clawed at the angel's arms. My nails merely scratched against the stone skin as I felt my energy slowly deplete even further than it was in my spirit.
Accept your fate, demon, and I will bring her back to the human world unharmed. Refuse, and I will release her to the gates of hell for the devil spawn to ravish.
As he spoke of James's potential refusal, a large wave of heat burst beneath my feet, causing me to look down and scream at the sight on the ground. Beneath my body was a large open circle with red flames flaring out at me. Between the flames I could barely make out the sight of hundreds of hands reaching up to try and stretch themselves through the hole above them and towards me. Each hand burned in red sent waves of remembrance through my body as I imagined as an image of Malix appeared in my head. My fear only spurred me to flail harder in the hold I was in, and carrying of the friction his hand was causing my skin. I could feel blood gather and dribble from the back of my neck, flesh tearing open from my attempts. Oh, here comes the sad end. James stared at me, quaking from the fear of the situation. We were far away from him, where he couldn't reach me even if he sprinted as I dropped. I was left to James's decision. James's body began to rumble in despair as James dropped to his knees and slammed his hands onto the marble ground. My heart dropped at his words.
I accept my fate.
No. James!
I accept my fate! Now release her!
Obediently, oh god. I was like, oh, yeah, you just told him to release me, so, whoop, bye. Obediently, the angel loosened his grip on my neck as the hole beneath me closed. As my feet touched the ground, the angel fully released me and watched as I rushed over to James, sliding onto my knees before him. James, no.
Say your farewell to her, demon. I will grant her that much before I take her back.
I wrapped my arms around him, desperate not to let go. I wouldn't be separated from James, ever. James, however, wrapped an arm around me and buried his head in my shoulder, his tears falling over it.
I said.
F you, I'm not leaving him. James slowly stood with me in his arms, causing me to stand on my 2 feet as well. He pulled away and looked down at me, tears flowing down his cheeks.
I love you. I will forever love you until the day I die.
James gently cut my head in his hands and kissed me, shaking in grief as he did. I, however, could only stare in disbelief. Was he really going to let me go? I felt the small draft open behind me, causing the air around me to circulate and rush past my body before feeling one of James's hand lower to my sternum and push me back. No! No! With a gasp, I watched as James's kept his hand extended out to me while my body became sucked into some sort of portal. White feathers danced around the barrier, and my mind began to be flooded with memories that slowly evaporated the farther back I went. Oh. No. Tears continued to drip down James's cheeks as my memories began to fray and burn, causing tears to form in my eyes as well. Our marriage, our embraces, our love. It all turned to ash and vanished from my mind. Soon enough, the sight around me became pure white, and I could remember nothing but my name. Accepting destiny. That concludes James's sad alternate routes. No. Accepting destiny, achievement unlocked. I guess now we're moving on to Eric. But I'm probably gonna, in between, I guess, uploads, I'm gonna put different content because I know that this is starting to get pretty stale. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!